Hi everyone, and welcome to the, is it still June? Still June, Q&R with me, Brent Weeks, the author of the Night Angel series and the Lightbringer series. I know it takes everybody a while to come on in. Facebook lovingly buries us under layers of algorithm. So we're gonna answer a few questions that people had asked last time, that we had leftover questions. So if you have leftover questions this time that I don't get to in the next half hour or so, we're gonna keep this sort of brief for me. Please leave those below. Leave us in the question mark. We collect all of those, and then we get to the ones that we think are the most interesting the next time. So while you queue up your questions, I'm going to answer a few. Christy, go ahead.
Okay, this is from Jeff Wilson. Hi from Brisbane. Have you ever been told you can't put that in your book by someone? And please elaborate. Which I will remind you, at first you said no, and I had to remind you that this has actually happened. So
yeah, my wife corrected me, and she's right again, as always happens. Actually, there was 2 times in the last almost 21 years where I've been right, and we said, no, I think you're wrong, and actually I've been correct. So at least twice, so it does happen. You're telling me there's a chance for it. So I thought, no, nobody's ever told me you can't put that in a book. And it was sort of true. Like, usually people don't care what you put in your book. If it's just not for them, they just won't pick it up. If you're unpublished and you're writing and they just don't like what you have in the first page or chapter, they just won't read it. And they won't tell you why. You'll just not be in there. However, when you're published, it's like the stuff that the questions people would ask, like, oh, are they going to make you do this or this? And it's like, that stuff never happened. Like, oh, are they going to make you put more sex in your book or something? And it's like, no. Are they going to make you not talk about this or this? And it was like, no. However, when I was writing The Black Prism, I did get pushback on something. So this is almost, no, this isn't the only thing. This is the thing that I got the most pushback on, and it was on Kip being fat. They're like, really? Like, and it was some of the comments were hilarious. It was like, wait, so he's fat, why does he have to pull his pants up? Like, why would his pants fall down if he's fat? Like, wouldn't his pants be held on? And I'm like, clearly these are people who've never struggled with their weight, because that's not how that works. And it was actually several different editors who had the same qualms, and they just thought, like, if you have a character who's fat, there's and I think, and they didn't give me the whole case, but I think what they're thinking is, people do discriminate against fat people now. It's like one of the last things that people still get away with, and so fat people are not attractive to most people. So if you say this person's fat and that's how you get introduced to them, a lot of people are just going to say, that's a turnoff. I don't want to spend my time with that character. And so they were really worried that fans would be turned off and just wouldn't keep reading, because Kip is introduced. He's obviously one of the main characters, and he's fat. And it's not hidden. It's like he's fat and he does think about it. And I'm sure they were right. I'm sure that did turn people off. And I just had this bulletproof self-confidence that I could make you love Kip. That it might take a while, but that you would come to adore this fat kid who has self-confidence problems. Kip also was a really nice anchor at the opposite end of the spectrum from Gavin Guile, who is effortlessly handsome and loved by everybody and smart, and everything comes easily to Gavin Guile. So I wanted to anchor these 2 really challenging characters, 2 characters that were really challenging for readers to identify with. I thought I'll have both character types that are impossible to identify with, and we will get to experience those characters kind of coming together, and I hoped that readers would enjoy that process. But I got a lot of pushback on that, like, can you not can you just not mention that so much? Can you do it less? And so I fought for that a little bit.
That's what I was remembering was, it wasn't that they were pushing against the fact that you had a fat character. It was how often that came up in his own sense of himself, and how much you continued to bring that up.
Right.
And they kind of wanted a few less mentions.
Yes.
And for sure the pants falling down
that was funny.
Was a thing.
Yeah.
But you were really exploring that this character thinks about this constantly. It's not just a small thing that bothers him occasionally. Yeah. Like, this is how he sees himself, and obviously you developed that throughout his character arc of his sense of self and how that didn't change.
You know, if you talk this much, you're gonna have to get it on camera.
No.
So, you guys should vote. I mean, I think if you had a poll, I think Christy should be on camera. But, you know, it's not up to me. So maybe if you vote and say, yes, Christy, please join us on camera, maybe she will, because she has great things to say. Yes, and obviously one of the big things I was talking about throughout Lightbringer was problems of perception. So truth versus perception, big theme all the way throughout. Of course, there's light magic, so perception is going to be one of the big things. Anyway, next question.
Okay, since we're already talking about Lightbringer world, we had a reader, Dan, I'm not going to say your name right, Dan Milkovic. That's as close as I can do. He said, I'm colorblind, and reading the Lightbringer series has always pulled me in with its descriptions of Luxon. Seeing as many of the Luxons have real-world analogs, what inspiration from the real world did you use for Peril and Kai?
Kai, yes. So Peril, thank you, Dan. I have to tell you, maybe the most angry fan mail I've ever gotten. Well, no, there's been a few. So one of the angriest fan mails I've ever gotten was from a colorblind reader who felt like I was saying awful things about colorblind people in our world, because in the world of Lightbringer, having colorblindness and using the magic is seriously hampers you, right? Like, if you can't differentiate between red and green, let's say, which is, you know, what I know only one kind of colorblindness, then if you're a red drafter or a green drafter and you're looking for source, you're gonna have trouble. And so that people would be discriminated against in the world, you know, made sense to me. It's like people are just as flawed in my books as they are in the real world and face discrimination. So he thought I was endorsing that, I think, and was really put out. So he was mad at me. So thank you for your. I'm glad that wasn't a universal feeling, because that clearly wasn't what I intended. So good question. It does have real world analogs. For Peril, I was using. And obviously there's some tweaks to these things, right? But for Peril, I was using an analog with millimeter waves. And so actually some of the stuff that you run into there that they do with millimeter waves is real life stuff, like seeing through surfaces and seeing things that are beyond you can do, or being able to detect things through clothing, they can do. And another thing that they can do is, which is just done a couple of times in the series, is making people feel like their skin is on fire. So the U.S. Army has been experimenting with, and I got to see a declassified brief of this. That was years ago. So I'm sure now it's totally in the public sphere. But basically a big dish, and they can point it at people, and you feel like your skin is on fire, but it doesn't hurt you. So if you're out riding and all of a sudden this van pulls up and it's got this big dish on top, and you feel like you're on fire, it's like, boy, you're gonna disperse real quick. So I thought that was amazing, and it had to do with light. So I was like, fantastic, and this fits in with what I was already doing with Peril. So I slotted that in, and then Kai is X-rays. So it's in the X-ray spectrum. So I thought that has, of course, some interesting things too. And so then you see some things which none of the characters understand, of people like getting cancer and wondering why. Oh, why do these people get tumors who are using this stuff constantly? It's like, well, it's Marie Curie, right? It's like, oh, this stone is warm. Oh, I worked with this for 20 years, and all of a sudden, I'm getting really sick. And so is everybody I know who works with this. And they didn't understand, even though, obviously, with the scientific background, very soon people were able to understand that stuff. But so yes, I had analogs for both of those. So thanks for looking for those, and great question. Thanks.
And you really wanted to develop a character, and I wouldn't let you.
Yeah. So here's the thing that epic fantasy writers really need to look out for, and that is, we like to make up stuff, and we like to make up new stuff, and there's, especially with certain systems, but probably it's just a universal temptation. Whenever you go someplace new, you want to make up new characters. Like, there's new things to do, and it's kind of that's fun. That's fun for us. It's like, so when I had Kai, I was like, oh, you know what? I don't have a character who has this, and I need somebody who's the leader of this group. And so, like, I made up this whole backstory, and then I was just so excited to tell more. And my wife was like, honey, fewer characters. Bring it to a close. You got to do this.
This
like,
was
look,
while you were writing Burning White. Like,
this,
it
yeah.
needed to, there were no.
I knew this. You know, I had so much. I did. The character does still appear. She just has a significantly smaller place than I wanted her to have. But it honestly, it really is it's a problem for fantasy writers. Like, we tend to be good at making up new things. We tend to be good at making up new characters and tying them together in interesting ways. And it's like, if you keep doing that, you cannot wrangle the story to a conclusion, because at some point it's like, you need to, in order for it to have a shape as fiction does, and for the characters who are named, who've been established, to be playing leading roles in at least most of the concluding big actions, and for all of your named important people, the subplots to actually affect the main plot. Those are important things in a novel. Like, in our narratives, we expect that to be there, and not to just be some random person, like can happen in real life. You know, a random person walks up and shoots the president or something, and you're like, that person wasn't named, that person wasn't a character on our radar. But in real life, that can happen, and that person hijacks the narrative. In a fantasy book, in our narratives, we don't generally like that when that just comes up after a couple thousand pages, or probably even after 100 pages. If you just had something end like that, people would be like, neat artistic experiment, neat literary experiment, but I don't want that in my novels. You know, I've toyed with this idea of, what if you had a subplot that just never connects with the main plot, and like, it doesn't have anything to do actually with the other characters. Like, the whole time you're reading, you're just like, how is this going to come together? I know it's going to come together, and then, you know, expectations subverted. It doesn't come together. They just never meet. It'd be like, yeah, that would be intellectually interesting. Like, oh, you did subvert my expectations, but in every other way, it'd be like, wow, you gave me a gift, and I opened it, and it's full of crap. It's like, that's a bad surprise. It's a surprise, but it's a bad surprise. So, yeah, there's certain things you just shouldn't do. So there's certain, like, narrative structures that they defy reality a little bit, but you're looking in narrative for verisimilitude. So that's life-likeness, not reality, because reality is messy and doesn't make sense, and we like our narratives to make sense, at least on some level. Next question, maybe one more, and then we'll jump into some live questions if they're. So I don't know. I could just be alone here. Nobody might have shown up. There might be 0 questions. So true. That's like, I'm just talking to a camera. It's kind of terrifying. It just stares at me like this, and it doesn't blink. It's very odd. Sorry. Okay, go ahead. Next question.
So this kind of bridges Lightbringer with Night Angel. Was it a Durzo reference when Master Sharp told Tia to chew mint, so not to have breath like she was chewing on garlic. That's from Cold to Zordell.
Of course it was. Of course it was. I mean, it was an Easter egg. I mean, it's not necessarily the world's crossing. It's me giving a little wink to the readers. So I try to do this in ways that it's like, okay, the character might have actually said something like that, and it doesn't break character for him to say this. But on the other hand, if you're paying attention and you happen to notice this while you're reading, it should surprise you and maybe get a chuckle or a laugh when you're like, wait, what the? Oh my God, he didn't really. So I've done Easter eggs in quite a few things, and sometimes I've waited years for you guys to find them. There's one that I felt like was really obvious, and still nobody has ever commented on it, and I'm just waiting. I'm ready, you guys. I'm ready. So, just read carefully. Okay. I think that's good.
Okay.
I think Melanie challenged them to make me laugh or blush, and I'm hot. So, blushing is probably just the default state already. So we'll see what they got for me.
Okay. This is not a funny one.
Okay. Sorry. I shouldn't have brought that up.
It's a good, still we're
meshing things.
Meshing both worlds here. So a question going around on the forums, says Alex Stebbin. Kyler versus Kip.
Oh man, yeah. So Kyler versus Kip. It just totally depends. It just totally depends on the setup, right? Like how are you going to do a setup that's fair, and would Kyler agree to a setup that's fair? So I'd still probably say in lots of things, because it's not just like who's the most powerful. It's like if they had to fight each other, Kyler would have an edge just because he's sneaky and he's learned not to fight fair.
He's trained to be a killer.
He's trained to kill people and make it so they can't stop him. And so, it's like, okay, fist fight, guys, get out there. Things might turn out differently. So I don't know. I don't love those kind of questions. So don't ask me those questions. Those terrible questions.
Those are great questions for fans to debate.
That's right. Those are good fan questions. So. Okay. I live here, so I'm trying to, temper it. So sorry it's less of a show than it would be, but, I got to be careful what I actually say out loud.
Okay. Want the illusions and glamours one?
I don't remember which one that was.
In previous titles, I feel Kyler would have detected the illusions and glamours used on him. Will this be covered?
Oh, so yeah. So this is one of the things that I've had a few questions on. Characters who are readers who felt like, well, what happened to Kyler? Why isn't Kyler got his swagger or whatever? And like why is Kyler so messed up in this book? And because you're reading the book because you're reading Nemesis in first person, it's like you are experiencing what Kyler is telling you. And so Kyler can only tell you what he's aware of, and then also what he's willing to tell you. So like many men, maybe many people who are depressed, Kyler doesn't realize he's depressed. He's not self-aware enough to know that. And so one of the things I hope for with readers in reading Nemesis is to kind of challenge you. It's like, okay, so I've set this thing up. It's like, what's happened in Kyler's life. Is there anything in Kyler's life that not that he tells you, not that it's spelled out on the page, but that about his life that would explain why he's off his game? And it's like, well, yes, if you think about it a little bit, like the guy just lost his wife, and he's lost, he's obviously got troubles going on with his master. He's lost touch with a lot of his friends. People have left town. He's all alone, and sort of like, yeah, you won, except and everybody's happy except your wife is dead. You know, that sucks. And the people you're closest to have all left. And so Kyler is, he's devastated. And Kyler's not the kind of guy to say, here, let me tell you how devastated I am and go into it. He just is. And you see it in how he's acting. He doesn't spell it out for you. So you have to say, why is Kyler such a mess? It's like, well, we have reasons why Kyler is such a mess. So then when you see things like, okay, so at the end, so this little spoiler, or the question, I think, sort of invites some spoilers. But it's like, Kyler, there's a lot going on, right? Like there's a lot going on for him. And like the things that he does notice, he has immediate answers for. It's like, okay, so Vi is there. And it's like, oh, well, why doesn't he notice that she's doing magic? It's like, he does notice she's doing magic because she's doing all sorts of magic. And so he thinks what magic he sees is her doing all that stuff. And so he's got an immediate explanation for that. So he uses that on her. And he doesn't, why doesn't he notice in the middle of a huge fight to the death that this thing's happening? It's like, well, one, it's completely attuned to him. Two, there's a lot going on. And three, he's a little bit off of his game because of everything that's happening. It's like everything is pretty emotionally devastating already for Kyler, and is enough to take all of his attention as he's entering this scene. I mean, just think about all the things that have happened to Kyler in the last 2 hours. When you think about what he runs into there on the end in the boat when Vi uses that magic on him. It's like it's kind of a lot. It's kind of a lot, and Kyler is. Like there's something that I wanted to work with here that I've always wanted to stress. It's like Kyler is this amazing kick-ass guy, despite being young. Like he's really great at certain skills, and that has come at the expense of him being bad at normal skills. Like he's still 21 years old. Like he is. He's the guy who wasn't hanging out with people and learning how to date and like, oh, well, how do you pick up girls? He doesn't know that sort of thing. Why? Because he's been working on assassiny stuff for, 14 hours a day. And that's been everything that his world has revolved around is, okay, how to fight, how to prepare poisons, how to sneak, how to hide, how to do these things, how to do disguises. It's like he's bad at other just real life stuff that would be normal. And so it's like expecting Kyler to be like a 35-year-old James Bond character. It's like, that's not who he is. Like, that's totally unrealistic. And I know we're talking, realism in a fantasy world, but it's like, I feel like character realism is important. It's like people who are really great at certain things have spent all of their time on them, especially young people. It's like, oh man, Magnus Carlsen, it's like you're 18 and you're spending 14 hours a day playing chess. It's like, there's gonna be some things you're not very good at. Somebody is gonna mention who's playing, baseball this weekend, and he's just gonna have no idea what you're talking about, even if he happened to live in the city where the World Series is being played. He just wouldn't be aware of that because we only have so much time to focus. And so to me, that anchors Kyler. It makes him a more realistic character. It makes him more human because most of us, even if we're really good at certain things, we aren't good at everything. And even though that fantasy is kind of fun to think about, like, oh, being James Bond, being good at everything, and you're kind of bulletproof and you walk through hails of gunfire and everything works out well for you. It's like, yeah, that's kind of fun. That's certainly a kind of fiction that people can enjoy. And I wanted to do a kind of fiction where it's like, this is a little more psychologically real. I'm going to ask questions about these characters who are very lopsided people. They don't do everything right. They don't always make good decisions. Sometimes make horrible decisions that are obvious to us, but look realistic from their point of view. Like if you put yourself in their shoes, it's like, okay, well, that made sense at the time, but like, since I know more, and since I have the luxury of sitting around being like, man, that's not the right thing you should have done. It's like, yeah, you're right. Like frequently you are right. Like maybe there was a better thing Kyler could have done, but is it realistic that he would think of that? Or is it realistic that he would not think of that in the moment? So That's all I got for that.
Okay.
We got 5 more minutes.
Yeah.
Any more questions?
So one new one that just came in, Justice Cawthor.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to be able to answer this in 2 minutes, but
Nice.
I'm thinking about the social constructs in the Lightbringer and how Kip has to engage in so many complex interactions in the series. How do you go about learning to write these interactions and making them feel organic?
Okay, I think I've got an angle on that. Just read it again, though.
Okay.
Read the whole question again.
Thinking about the social constructs and how Kip has to engage in so many complex interactions in the series, how do you go about learning to write these interactions and making them feel organic?
Oh, okay. Okay, so practice. There. I answered it in less than 2 minutes. Look, like we all gravitate to certain kinds of fiction. And then as writers, we gravitate to certain things that we think are really fun, like types of writing that are fun. Like if you're going for a laugh, there's certain writers you're going to turn to, right? And then there's certain writers you're like, yeah, not super funny, but great world building, or whatever. So like to me, people fascinate me, and people who are really good at social things fascinate me. It's neat for me to see how people work each other or work through problems and use their minds, on the spot. And sometimes they're clever, sometimes they're funny, or sometimes they're just so stinking smart they get you to do things, and you're like, did I volunteer to do? I know I did volunteer to do that thing, but I walked in here saying I wasn't going to volunteer to do that. How did that happen? Once I got, I can say that. Once I got threatened with a lawsuit, and it was really kind of fun to see how the dude who did it, who's this super high-powered guy, like how he entered the conversation and like the aggression that he had, and then he, after all that, he like offered me this nice carrot, and it worked really nicely. And it was like, wow, one, that was really scary because I don't want to be bankrupt. And two, oh, that's really neat how he actually did that. And like taking those things apart and figuring out what people do with power is really interesting to me. So I like to show those things because I'm like, that fascinates me. So I naturally gravitate to showing those things and thinking about like, well, what if you put Kip in a place with somebody who totally bowls him over with his power, like, his grandpa. And so his grandpa kind of goes after Kip, partly informed in one of their interactions, partly that was informed by this interaction I'd had with this guy, threatened to sue me in a foreign court and all this stuff, and it was fun. Except, fun in the way of like, oh, financial ruin, that's awesome. I hadn't done anything wrong either. But as you know, when you get sued, you can still be financially ruined if the other person just has that much more money than you do, even if you win. So I like to use those things that I learned both in real life and then also just in fiction, or not in fiction, but that I read in history. I gravitate to super interesting characters and these larger than life characters and go, how did they get that to work? You look at Alexander the Great, and it's like, how did this 17-year-old kid, so he has all these generals, he inherits his father's generals, they all go win, and when he dies, like each of those generals, like he had numerous generals, all who then went and established, well, not all of them, but numerous of them went and established long-standing kingdoms. That, like, each of those guys were kings in their own right, who were able to hold together huge empires, and somehow this kid was able to bend these men, who were obviously hugely arrogant and strong and very, very good at all the things that a king has to be good at. He bent these older men to his will. It's like, how the heck did he do that? And we have snippets of speeches that he gave, and so like taking those things apart and being like, that's a really interesting puzzle to me. That's always been something that fascinates me. So I dig into the stuff that fascinates me, and then I write about it, and then so in a way, my flippant answer practice is totally true. It's like I read about that stuff, I learn about it, I'm interested in it, I dive into it, I write it, I rewrite it, I see if it makes sense, I rewrite it, and I do that a bunch of times until I get relatively good at it. So thank you, by the way. I think that is all we have time for today. And I had a couple things that I was supposed to remember to bring up. So one is that I will be appearing in St. Louis at what's the thing called again? At Realm Makers. There's a convention there, and
Saturday night, July 15th.
Saturday night, July 15th.
At 7 p.m.
At 7 p.m. there will be a signing, and I think you don't have to be an attendee to show up there. So if you live in St. Louis or nearby, close enough to show up and want me to sign a book, then I'll be there. I'll be happy to sign books for you.
At the Sheraton Westport Chalet.
At the Sheraton Westport Chalet. So that's July 15th at 7 p.m. At the Sheraton Westport Chalet in St. Louis. So love to see you there if you can be there, and check out Realm Makers if you're a writer and it looks like a thing that you'd be interested in. And is that it? Just 3 minutes past, but I know it took you 3 minutes to find this, so I've really only kept you for half an hour, right? Thanks so much, everyone. That's it for us for this month, and I will try to be back next time. Leave a comment. Leave if you have any questions for me that I didn't hit. Cue those up, because I'll start with some of those next time, just like I did this time. And if you really want Christy to be on camera, you could find one of the comments. Somebody probably says, yes, Christy. They probably have already said, yes, Christy, please be on camera. Upvote that, and Christy will see, oh, look, 4 people want me to be on camera. And then she'll have her feelings hurt, and she probably won't be on camera. But, if there's 5, maybe that'll be enough. So, thanks so much. And as soon as my wife can run around the camera and press stop live streaming, we will do that. Take care. Bye-bye.